I'm going to say something that some of you will disagree with and might sound controversial, but I don't believe it is. None of you, not a single one of you, should buy a GTX 3070. None of you.
Yep.
I think the 3070 is a little bit too much, and I actually think the 3080 might actually be $100 too cheap. They could have priced the 3080 at $799, and I don't think anything would change in terms of our conversation. I actually think it's a deal. Here's why. The 3070 is 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, not X, 6. The 3080 is 10 gigabytes of GDDR6X. The 6X has 2 times the memory bandwidth. It is 4 bits per clock cycle instead of 2.
So what does that do?
It allows for high resolution texture transfer at double the rate. It allows for games to have growth. Junior asked the question, what does that do? Why does having faster memory bandwidth matter? That's actually a great question that isn't covered often enough. The short answer is you need enough memory bandwidth to cover whatever you're doing. More won't help. It's why DDR4 3000 or 3200 is an improvement over 2400, but DDR4 4000 is not. Because at some point you have enough memory bandwidth and more doesn't fix the bottleneck. There's something else in the system that's causing a delay. With video cards, the reason why they use VRAM or video RAM and the reason why it's graphics double data rate RAM is it is many, many times faster than the DDR4 in your system. Why don't we use GDDR for our system memory? Because it's like 2 to 3 times the price per gigabyte of DDR4, and it's not necessary with on-chip caches and a variety of things. But with the data rates and the volume of data that has to be worked with on video cards, with the 4K textures that are in modern games, with the large data sets, so much data has to be loaded that what you're seeing on the screen, first of all, let me back up a second. Your CPU generally computes the wireframe model, the collision detection, the artificial intelligence, the enemy actions, the bullet collisions, the keyboard input. It creates the world. It builds the frames one frame at a time. It then sends that raw data to the graphics card, and the graphics card then paints it with a paintbrush. It adds the lights, the textures, the depth of field, the Z buffer. It puts all of the stuff in to take what is basically a wireframe model and makes it pretty.
So the CPU makes like the frame of the house, and then the GPU does the rest of the house.
The GPU paints the house. The CPU builds the house. And this is why CPU performance is important, especially in high frame rate gaming. If you want to play at 144 frames per second, you've got to have a great CPU because the CPU has to do all of the AI work, all of the collision detection, your movement input. It has to do the wireframe build. Exactly. It has to do all of the initial construction. The graphics card can't draw more frames. And see, this is why people who have a low end or an older CPU, they go, well, I'll just run at low detail and that will work. That'll help a little bit because at low detail, the CPU has to put less into the scene. But the only thing you're really reducing there is the wireframe model. All of the procedural generation of the world is still done on your CPU.
Exactly.
Nobody should buy a 3700. They should buy a
3070.
Man, that's going to be confusing. Nobody should buy a 3070. They should buy a 3080 because for $200, you're going from 500 to 700. You're going from 8 gigs of VRAM to 10. You're going from GDDR6 to GDDR6X, which is double the data rate, which means as data sets get bigger, as games get bigger, the performance difference between those cards will increase over time. Less so today, but 2 years from now, there will be a larger gap. Kind of like how the GTX 970 was fine with its 3.5 gigs of fast RAM and 0.5 gigs of slow RAM. Remember that scandal? It was less of a deal then, but as data sets have gotten bigger, it hurts more now. The other consideration is the 3080 has more CUDA cores, more ray tracing. It has more performance across the board. And then let me step back a second. If you have the kind of computer that is worth a $500 video card, and you have $500 to buy a video card to play games on, then with all due respect, you have $700. And if you say oh, I can't afford 700. 700 is way too much. You don't have 500 either. You might have a credit card you could put 500 on, but if you've somehow magically saved up $500 in your hip pocket National Bank, you should be able to come up with 700. Now, that comment will offend at least one person. It's not my intention to offend you, but to be blunt, if you're in an economic position where the difference between 700 and 500 makes or breaks you, I would submit you're buying way too much video card and your priorities in life are thrown off. Now, that's a Papa Deals comment there from the there's more to life than video cards and you should make sure you have savings in your pocket. But if money's tight, $200 is where you should be buying a video card.
Yes.
Not $500 or $700.
Exactly.
Now, here's the funny thing. On the 20 series, I said, buy the 2070, don't buy the 2080. Because the 2080 was not worth buying because they both had the same GDDR6, they both had the same 8 gigs, there was no difference, and the performance difference was fairly minor, but it was still $200, $500 to $700. And I said, this is ridiculous. Why would you buy a 2080? Buy a 2070. The same was true on the 10 series. Mm-hmm. The 1080 didn't offer enough over the 1070. But this time,
it does.
There's a difference?
8 versus 10.
Yep.
And
6 versus 6.
double the data speed. Those are over the... Look, for the first time, Nvidia put 8K 60 frame per second gaming. Now, granted, that's the 3090, but they put that right into their presentation.
They did.
Games are going... Look how big Call of Duty Modern Warfare is today at 200 gigs. Flight Sim is 150 and growing.
Yes.
That game's only going to get bigger and bigger. Jensen commented on the size of games growing, and he commented on the need for RTX I/O and data transfers directly from NVMe Gen 4 drives straight to the GPU memory, bypassing the CPU.
There's a cool picture of that actually in the presentation.
Which we'll have a video on tomorrow, which XD did an awesome job editing. Very excited about that.